Today we're going to learn how to graph negative fractions and decimals on a number line and how to use that number line to compare um, negative fractions and decimals. For example, like which one is greater than the other or less than the other. Okay, and we're not going to take many notes because we really went through the steps really thoroughly yesterday. So we're just going to do some examples building off of what we learned yesterday in our lesson with positive fractions and decimals. So our first question is just going to be to graph the rational number and its opposite. Okay, so not only do we want to graph 3/4, we want to also graph the opposite of 3/4. So the first thing I want you to do is write in the opposite of 3/4. That's going to be equal to negative 3/4. What I want you to do next then is decide which two integers each of these fractions fall in between. That's going to help us know what our number line has to start at and what it has to end at. Okay, so 3/4 is in between 0 and 1. Actually, I'm going to write it next to it. Different color, so it stands out. 0 and 1. And negative 3/4 is then in between 0 and negative 1 on the number line. Okay, so our least value is going to be on our left. That would be negative 1. Our greatest value, which is 1, is going to be on our right. And all that we have in the middle is 0. Okay, so we are going to graph 3/4. Now they have the same denominator, so we don't need to find a common denominator. That fourths tells us that we need to split this number line into 4 equal parts. And if we have 4 equal parts, we have 3 tick marks in between each of our whole numbers or integers. Okay. Last but not least, we need to, next we need to label them. Okay, so let's do positives first. All right, so after 1 and we're counting by fourths, after 0, sorry, and we're counting by fourths, we'd have 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, just like we did yesterday. Okay, now remember opposites have the same distance from 0. So if we're counting negative this way, if 1/4 is our first tick mark over here, negative 1/4 is our first tick mark here. This is where most students get confused because they put negative 3/4 here. Okay, but we're still just counting this way, away from 0. So then negative 2/4 and negative 3/4. Now for our last step, we just put our dots on 3/4 and negative 3/4. And we are finished. Okay, let's do another example just similar, but with decimals instead of fractions. Okay, so we want to graph 1.6 and its opposite. Okay, well first we need to decide what is the opposite of negative 1.6. I want you to write that on the opposite blank. Okay, the opposite of negative 1.6 is going to be, I don't know why my color's not changing, positive 1.6. We then need to decide what two numbers negative 1.6 is in between. Okay, so that's going to be a negative 1 and a negative 2. 1.6 is going to be in between 1 and 2. You're going to notice that whatever the positive one, the two integers it's in between, is going to be the same, but they're just going to be negative for the negative value. Okay, so you can always use like the positive value to find what two numbers it's in between, and then when you have a negative value, just know it's a negative 1 and negative 2 instead of a positive 1 and positive 2. Okay, and this is where this number line gets a little bit trickier because our lowest value is negative 2 and our largest value is 2. Okay, so we have negative 1, 0, and 1 that we all need to put in between here. So we're going to put 0 in the middle and negative 1 halfway in between 0 and negative 2 and a positive 1 halfway between 0 and positive 2. Okay. Now I am using colors so it's going to stand out more, but if you are not using colors, what you want to do is really make those integer tick marks super noticeable. Okay, because we're going to be putting lots of other tick marks in here, and you don't want to get confused. Okay, and the more noticeable you make them, you're going to see it's going to be a lot simpler. I'm going to use red just so it stands out for you guys for the purpose of this video. But if you don't want to use colors yet, just make those integer ones super bold. All right, let's do 1.6 first because we learned about that yesterday. Okay, now we could count We could split them into 10 equal parts and count 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. But I'm going to show you another example because there's so many different ways you can do this. Counting by 0.2. Okay, so when we count by 0.2, 0.2 can go into 1 5 times, so we need to split it up into fifths, which is 4 tick marks in between all of our integers. See how when I use colors it makes it super simple to tell which tick marks are for integers, or when you make them super bold it helps too. Alright, so this first value right here is going to be 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, 1, 1.2, 1.4, 1.6, 1.8, and then 2. Okay, you could have also counted by 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6. You get the same answer in about the same placement. Okay. Next, we want to do negative 1.6. So again, we're going to count the opposite way. So this first one's going to be negative 0.2, negative 0.4, negative 0.6, negative 0.8, negative 1, negative 1.2, negative 1.4, negative 1.6. If you can't fit it in, it's always okay to draw an arrow. And then negative 1.8. We wanted to graph negative 1.6 and positive 1.6. Okay, so that's how we would do that problem. Again, there's multiple correct ways to do that. I just chose the easiest, which was counting by 0.2. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the examples where we're comparing them. So we're saying which one is greater, which one is less. And we're going to use number lines in order to do that. Okay, but you don't always need to use a number line. For example, on your quiz, you're going to be able to choose whether you want to just show your work or use a number line. So the way that you would do it without doing a number line is by comparing the fractions and mixed numbers by finding a common denominator, which you have to do when you're graphing anyways to know what to split it up into how many equal parts. Okay. Okay. So we're comparing negative a half and negative 3/4 using a number line. Okay, and we need to think negative 1/2 and negative 3/4 are in between which two integers. Okay, so we can use that trick of finding the opposites and what those two integers are in, and then just finding the negative values of that. So 1/2 and 3/4 are in between 0 and 1. So negative 1/2 and negative 3/4 are in between 0 and negative 1. Okay, remember 0 is neither positive nor negative. All right, so our lowest value is negative 1. Highest value is 0. We have negative a half and negative 3/4. So we need to find that common denominator. That common denominator between 2 and 4 is going to be equal to 4. Okay, so first things first, we need to make negative 1/2 out of fourths. Negative 1/2 equals something out of 4. It's going to be a negative. To go from 2 to 4, we multiply by 2. So we do 1 times 2 to get negative 2/4. Okay, and then we have negative 3/4. So we now have a common denominator. We need to split this line up into 4 equal parts, which means 3 tick marks. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Then we are going to count. Now think, if we were going positive, our first tick mark would be positive 1/4. So if we're going negative, our first tick mark is going to be negative 1/4. So you can always use that positive number, since you guys were rocking that yesterday, to help guide your thinking of, ooh, what do I start with right here? Okay, then the next tick mark will be negative 2/4, negative 3/4. Okay. Now we want to plot negative 2/4, negative 3/4, and then we can compare. Okay, so negative 3/4 is to the left, so it's less than negative 2/4. So there's two possible answers here. You could say negative 3/4 is less than negative 2/4, because since negative 2/4 is to the right, it's greater. Remember, least to greatest are number lines. least, and you could always label it if you needed to. Greatest, if that helps you out. Okay, the other possible answer though, I'm just going to write up here, or you could flip the order and say -2/4 is greater than -3/4. These mean the exact same thing. Both symbols are opening up or eating that larger value. It's just flipping the numbers and flipping the signs. It really does not matter which one you would choose. Now on your quiz, you're going to be given like -2/4. Sorry, you don't have to write this down. -2/4 blank, -3/4, and at that time you'd have to write in the symbol greater than. Less than would not work here because we're not flipping the order. Okay, so on your quiz you're going to have to pick a symbol, but for this it's just an open statement, so you don't have to, you can write it either way. All right, let's do a little bit harder example. We are comparing -4 5/6 and -4 1/6 using a number line. All right, so -4 5/6 and -4 1/6 are in between which two integers? Well, I know that the positive values 4 1/6 and 4 5/6 is in between 4 and 5. So this is going to be in between -4 and -5. Now my smaller value is going to go on the left, so I have -5, larger value on the right, -4. All right. Now my common denominator I already have. It's 6. Okay, both fractions have a 6 in the denominator. So I am going to just split this line up into 6. If I split it in half, and this is another one where I'm going to either bold those integer lines. Okay, this is would not be bolded. If I split it in half, I need 2 halves of 3 because that's how I make 6. So just helps to make it a little bit more accurate when you split it in half first with an even number. All right. So let's think if we were positive, our value here would be like 4 and 1/6. So if we're going negative, this same exact one would be -4 and 1/6. Okay, -4 and 2/6, -4 and 3/6, -4 and 4/6, -4 and 5/6. Okay, we are going to plot or graph our -4 and 5/6 and -4 and 1/6. All right, so our two answers here, because remember there's two possible answers if it doesn't force you to put a symbol in, would be -4 and 5/6 is less than, because it's more to the left, than -4 and 1/6, or -4 and 1/6 is greater than -4 and 5/6, since -4 and 1/6 is more to the right. Remember, these are our greater values, these are our lesser values. Okay. All right, just a couple more examples. Number 3, we are comparing -3.08 and -3.8 using a number line. Okay, here's where it might get a little messy, because we're going to have to do a lot of splitting up. So we have the numbers -3.08 and -3.8. Those are in between the two integers, -3 and -4. Okay, -4 is less, so that goes on my left-hand side. -3 goes to the right. All right. Now I have -3.8. Let's start with that. Okay, here I could count by 3.2s. I could count by 3.1s. For the sake of this example, since we counted by 0.2s before, let's count by 0.1s. Okay, so this, we would be dividing it into 10 because decimals are out of tenths. So I divide it in half, and then I need 5 spaces on this half, which is 4 tick marks, and 5 spaces over here, which is another 4 tick marks. Okay. And I'm going to count backwards. So this is -3.1, -3.2, -3.3, -3.4, -3.5, -3.6, negative 3.7, negative 3.8, negative 3.9, and then 4. Okay, so here we can plot negative 3.8. Sorry, that was supposed to be green. So negative 3.8 would be here. All right, now we want to do negative 3.08. And let's break that down a little bit more. What decimal is negative 3.08 in between? Well, that's going to be in between negative 3.0 and negative 3.1. Okay, right here is negative 3.0, because remember 3.0 is the same thing as just 3, and 3.1. Right here, we could count tenths. My marker is going to be too big to do this. Okay, so in between here, since it's a 3.08, I'm going to count by 0.2, which is 5 sections, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so this first tick mark would be negative 3.2, negative 3.4, negative 3.6, negative, let's use, negative 3.08 would be right here. Okay, so we are comparing negative 3.8 and negative 3.08. Two answers. One could be negative 3.8 is less than, since it's farther to the left. Left is less. Okay, is less than negative 3.08. And negative 3.08 is greater than negative 3.8 since it's more to the right. Okay. Okay. I know this is a little bit tricky, okay, but if you slow down and process all the information, you guys can do it. Number 4, last example. We want to compare the following values from least to greatest using a number line. Okay, when we have to use a number line for this kind of stuff, we need to know what our smallest number is to put over here and our largest number to put over here, because we don't want to make this way too small. It just makes your life harder. Okay, so our smallest number in this list, or the one with the least value, is going to be negative 5. Our largest value is going to be, looks like 3.5. Okay, but in order to get 3.5, it goes past 3, so we need to go to 4. So here we're going to have a positive, and I'm actually going to extend this line so we're not like cramming it in. Okay, I need to go from negative or positive 4 to negative 5. Somewhere in here I need a 0. It's not quite in the middle since we're not going to the same numbers on each side. Here I need a 1, 2, oops, that's too close. 2, 3, 4. And then on this side I need a negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. Oh, that's way too space close. Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. I'm going to go in and label those. Okay. Let's plot our integers first. Okay, so negative 5 right here. 1 right here. Okay, so our whole numbers, just get rid of them right away. 3.5, that's a pretty easy one to do as well. In between that 3 and 4, we just need to cut it in half. And plot 3.5 right here. So write 3.5. Sorry, I should be labeling these. That's 1. This is 5. Okay. Then let's do 6/4. Okay, but first we have to reduce this. 4 goes into 6 one whole time. And then we have 2/4 left, which is equal to 1 and 1/2. So 1 1/2. We're going to break this up into halves. This right here, that's a 1. And when we label our number line, we actually want to use the values that were given to us. So instead of using 1 1/2, we want to use 6/4. Okay, this just makes it super simple for when we're writing our list down here, which on your quiz, when you write this list, you're going to have to give the values that you were given and not what you converted it to. So it just makes it super simple for when we have to write our answer in a minute. All right, now we only have two left. Negative 2.35 and negative 2.52. Okay. When we are doing negative 2.52, we want to find out where negative 2.5 is. It should be right in the half. And it would be just a little bit this way, negative 2.52. Then we're going to do negative 2.35. And that's just going to be a little bit before. Let's see what color I did not use yet. Yellow. That's going to end up being just a little bit before. I'm going to write negative 2. Sorry, I'll do that in black so you can read it. Okay, now you could break these down into like negative 2.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 9, sorry, because then we'd be at negative 3. And then do it a little more accurately because of the spacing. I wasn't able to do that. But as long as we get that order from least to greatest, we're good to go. Now we just write it. 5 is our first one. Negative 2.52. Negative 2.35. 1. 6/4. 3.5. And we are finished. That's it. All right, thanks for hanging in there, guys. I know today was not as simple as yesterday when we learned the positive fractions and decimals, but you guys can do this stuff. Just slow down and process it, okay? Make sense of the problems and find those common denominators.